Good morning. 2nd of May. Today's talk is going to be about, of course, legal matters, but we have got three very important guest artists. So today I'll be talking about God, your mother, and your third standard class teacher. All wrapped up into a talk on legal subjects. So, yesterday was the commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the High Court. It should have been a very big celebration with much fanfare. As it was a somber occasion where everybody got together via the internet, one way or another. Solemn speeches were made. And we may not have paid much heed to it, but in these times of crisis, you tend to listen to every word which comes from outside very closely. And I was struck by some of the words which were uttered by the Chief Justice. Very quoted, the late Justice H.R. Khanna, our President, late Sri S. Radhakrishnan. He stressed that the strength of the judiciary is not Article 142 or 141 or 226. It is actually the strength which is given to it by the people. The confidence which the people repose in the judiciary is indeed its strength. It's almost as if the judiciary is the judiciary as the people have endowed it with certain powers and characteristics which the citizens of the country believe in. And because they believe it has those characteristics, it indeed has those characteristics. Also mentioned was that nearly more than 800-year-old English document called the Magna Carta, which wily King John was forced to sign at Runnymede by the barons. The Magna Carta has thereafter been the lodestone to which you keep going back when you want to check what the issues are, which need forbearance on the part of the state, and what rights do individuals have. The Magna Carta says, to none we shall deny justice. That's where we all come in. To none we shall delay justice. And to none we shall sell justice. Now, the second and the third are actually subspecies of the first. We shall not delay justice. We shall not sell justice. Certain recent activities in courts clearly demonstrate the profound truth of the second dictum. We shall not delay justice. I'll speak about this a little later. But important questions come up and they are just postponed. Some reason or the other is given to postpone the decision. That is denial, no question. And to none we shall sell justice. That is to say, we shall not do things for motives other than to decide the case which we are dealing with. Now, forever, unjust, unfair decisions have been the result of either greed, that is to say venality, or to do favor to somebody. Favor includes being fearful of negative outcomes. This is not the place to talk about that type of denial of justice. Because here today we are here to celebrate our justice system. The learned Chief Justice posed the question, does the judicial system fulfill the expectations of the people? In my own humble way, let me try and answer that with a resounding yes. Now, barring the mischievous or cantankerous or impoverished litigant who appears party in person, the predominant contact point of the judiciary with the public is through the lawyer's interface. The lawyers represent the people, bring their causes before the honorable judges, and the judges decide the case put up by the lawyer, but the judges are actually deciding the case of the people who are standing behind the lawyer, the people, the litigant. So, with this interface, the expectations of the people are expressed before the judges through the lawyers. So, overwhelmingly, the judiciary meets the people through the lawyers, and therefore the people's wishes, expectations are articulated by the lawyers. And here comes the first of our expectations. We call it the lawyer's expectations, call it the people's expectations. God, representing strength and justice in its largest manifestation, in their largest manifestation. Mother, as representing nurture, compassion, and gentleness. And your third standard class teacher, representing immediate discipline and fair play in action. This is what is expected from the judiciary. So let's take the last first. Your third standard class teacher. Cast your mind back to the time you were tiny and wearing a school uniform. You're just learning your way about the social world. You're learning to interact with your class fellows. You're learning to interact with adults. You are learning something about yourself. And speaking for myself, what struck me most was that 40 or 50 children were kept in reasonably good check by your class teacher. Third standard I'm taking as the threshold of about 10. And at that time the class teacher he or she is teaching you stuff, but you are actually learning stuff on your own. They have to ensure only discipline and fair play immediately. If somebody makes a noise, shut it. If another person makes a noise, a child makes a noise, shut that also. Above all, children and people expect every authoritarian or every figure in authority to deal with each person equally. Which is not to say that a child who has got fever is nevertheless made to do his or her homework. He may be excused. But like is treated as like and equally. The impression of impartiality and instant discipline are what are required from the judiciary when they deal with the lawyers. Here I must tell you, it is an unfair day when the umpire, again my cricket analogy, umpire doesn't impose discipline on the playing field. It is no use the umpire saying to one offended player that the person who is offended you is another player, you sort it out. Whenever the judges do this, I believe they miss out on a chance to set things right. Therefore, I would respectfully submit that this discipline, where the judges decide between one person being right and another, is very much part of their job. Typically, this manifests itself in some persons taking unfair advantage of the system, in getting matters adjourned without asking. And in such cases, the best judges before whom I have appeared, and they have been very, very many, They upbraid the wrongdoer and then get on with it. They don't raise their hands in helplessness and say, what can I do? The judges can do many things. And expressing helplessness serves neither their cause nor the cause of justice. Then we have the mother. Nurture, compassion, the opposite of vindictiveness, and a kind, forgiving heart. These are absolute necessities, sine qua non, for a proper judicial approach. Not for the judges the harshness as we see in Merchant of Venice, where Shylock demands his pound of flesh. Their justice must be tempered by compassion, not my words. More brilliant judges and lawyers have used these, but I humbly borrow them. Must be tempered by compassion, gentleness, and above all, a toleration for the follies of the human condition. No judge is perfect, no human being is perfect, because all judges are human beings. So don't expect 100% average when you are checking the scorecard of a litigant before you. Balance it out and be compassionate. I promised God, so God comes last. God is in the larger sense of strength, fairness and justice in dealing and righting the wrongs of the world. And this is the highest and most lofty purpose of a judge's judicial work. They always say that the judge is God's representative on earth because he decides who goes to hell and who goes to heaven. So this Trinity, Holy Trinity, must inform all the actions of the judiciary. Now, after my earlier talk on what lawyers want, some people asked me what judges want. Some people asked that let's discuss something about what lawyers also want. Those of you who have not seen it, I have spoken earlier about what lawyers should do to improve their performance before the judges. I don't presume, or have the effrontery to tell the judges what to do. Consider this a desideratum, a wish list of what lawyers feel would be great if everybody did this. A large proportion of the honorable judges do it. But as I said, it's a wish list. First, and this is a vice I have to point out, is the judge-driven adjournment. I started coming to the High Court as an intern in the office of Shri K.J. Setna from about October of 1985. So 3 years internship, then before various late or present lawyers, Mr. K.L. Apichandani, Mr. K.G. Vakharia, senior advocate, where I learned so much. Then working with Shri Anil Dave, who was then solicitor to the government of Gujarat. At that time, we never had this idea, or we never had this occasion where he could come and smirkingly say that today the judge has adjourned the case. It would always be pesky lawyers who would try to wriggle out of difficult situations and take an adjournment. The judge never adjourned the matter. Now it has become a little more common. And it seems that some of the honorable judges postpone the hearing for something as simple as they need to read the matter a little more thoroughly. They need to check what the lawyer is saying. Is he telling us the correct statement of law? Now, this is extremely destructive and wasteful. Because, remember this, excuse me, lawyers are smart people. Somewhere through the hearing, they'll realize which way things are going. And the person who is a little apprehensive will always wish to postpone the inevitable to another date. The judge-driven adjournment plays into the hands of that lawyer. So that is something to be avoided. Another equally deleterious recent innovation, I'll call it an innovation, it's not a good one, is the hanging conclusion. And the hanging conclusion is most visible a few days or weeks before sittings are changed. Hearings are concluded and the judgment just doesn't come. Sometimes it doesn't come at all and the matter is listed elsewhere. This sends out a terrible signal. If among the 1,000 matters which are heard in the court on a given day, this happens in one matter, rest assured everybody will talk about that one case. It must never happen that the hearing is concluded and the judgment is never ever delivered and the matter suddenly finds its place somewhere else. This is a pernicious thing and it is wasteful, it's destructive. It shakes the confidence of the client who has been told, okay, now hearing is over, we are awaiting judgment. I entreat each and every lawyer and judge that let's try and avoid this state of events. The other subspecies of this is that the judgment just doesn't come within reasonable time. Now, we all know that judges are overburdened. We all know the crippling pressure under which they work. But that is a given. They are expected by the nature of their job to do this job. So please, I beg you, please let's have quick delivery of judgments. Because it breaks the link between the oral submissions and the ultimate outcome. Times without number, belated judgments don't seem to cover everything which is argued. Then there is this, as I mentioned earlier, the abdication of discipline, not calling out wrongdoing lawyers, treating the righteous lawyers and the unfair lawyers the same. These are not signs of fairness or aloofness. These are signs of abdication. Call out the wrongdoer and set things right. A very important other characteristic which seems to be slowly receding is the inability to be shocked. The judge, when coming across a case of egregious wrongdoing, should be shocked. He should say, Mr. Counsel, has this really happened? Now people have become blasé, or at least some of them have become blasé. One more pin to fall, one more tree to crash down, one more life destroyed. It's nothing, it happens every day. I beg of you, please retain that ability to be shocked, upset, perturbed, because then you can bring to bear the full majesty of law and set right the wrong. Then there is the steeplechase approach, where in any given case you decide where you want to go, and then you take the hearing in a direction where things may happen that way, where you reach the desired goal. I again remember Justice Balia, late Justice Balia, So never read the matter and come. And I believe he's an excellent company, Justice Chagla. MC Chagla used to do that, not the current Justice Chagla. He said, I make up my mind that I don't want to make up my mind. Because you cannot make up your mind on whether it's going to be a no ball or not, depending upon who the bowler is. You have to see the ball bowled. Then you can make up your mind checking the evidence that yes, he is overstepped. So these are a few reflections, because an idle mind is a devil's workshop. They are given with a lot of love and humility. And it is hoped that they are received with as much tolerance as we expect from our honorable judges. Good day.